Artist Collective podcast. This next one's about.
Hello and welcome to the New York Artist Collective podcast. This next one's about. I am your host, Stephanie Manns, singer-songwriter and co-producer of the New York Artist Collective. This evening, I'm super excited. We are going to have a book club. We are talking tonight about Glennon Doyle's recent release, Untamed. I think her previous one was called Love Warrior, but this one has really taken over social media, the world. It's amazing. And I have three amazing artists who are here to talk with me. So I have Erica Swindell.
What's up, guys?
Kaylyn Marie and Mr. John Gardner. Hello, everyone.
Hey guys, how's it going?
Good. It's so lovely to see you all. I haven't seen Kaylyn very often. John, I've seen you on social media, and Erica, we chat every now and again.
You see my face too often.
Not often enough, sweetheart. Not often enough. But it's such a pleasure to chat to you guys, and thank you, because when we do a book club, I'm asking people quite a lot, like to do quite a lot, read a book, make some notes, and talk about it.
Yeah, so I don't think that's too much. We should all be doing more of that now.
Good. Well, so as some background about all of you, so you're all three of you are singer-songwriters. You're all from different places, I believe. John and Erica, you sometimes play together. And you're all wonderful artists in your own right. So I'm very grateful for you to be here and to be contributing so graciously with your time and efforts tonight.
Of course.
So, shall we get down to it?
Yes.
Yeah.
We shall.
Yes. Okay. So one of the questions I was thinking about we could start with was that cheetah analogy. She starts off talking about the book, this cheetah analogy. So Glennon Doyle's Untamed, for those of you, I have it over here. Aha. And I have lots of sticky notes.
Let's hear it for that book cover, too.
I know!
So great.
Whoever did that art was really nailing it.
Let's see if we have the artist on it. I don't jacket design, Lynn Buckley. So shout out to Jin Buckley. Lynn Buckley. Good job. So Erica, in fact, maybe let's just start with you. What were your general thoughts on the book?
I mean, general thoughts was just it really kind of made my eyes wide several times throughout reading it, and hearing her describe her past, especially growing up in a Christian. That first thing that really blew my mind was that CDC or CCD thing where the woman just sat down without the Bible, didn't open it, and how impressed she was by that, and then continued to tell her own version of the Adam and Eve story. And I can remember in my childhood so many times being in that same position in a religious. I went to CCD, I went to all that, was raised Catholic, and you look to those people with such wide eyes and think they're gonna drop truth bombs on you, and then they just drop really confusing theories about life and God and love, and you're like, but wait, what? wait, what? So I think she really kind of, I don't know. In general, I'd say it's a really great piece on learning to be uncomfortable in our lack of knowledge and digging into that instead of shying away from it, which I think is really important, especially right now.
Mm-hmm. And was it, because you guys sort of read this, in fact, I think I read it too during the whole sort of pandemic thing as well. Did that sort of have an impact in the way that you perceived it either?
I read it a little bit later than when just the pandemic was sort of the focus of all of our lives, and sort of whenever the spilling over of the basket happened, and kind of going through navigating relationships with my parents that are now kind of uncomfortable when we start to try to talk about things. So the way that she led the discussions with her kids were really inspiring for me, because I think that we need to be better at that. I need to be better at that with my own family, and how she kind of takes a step back from herself and her own initial emotional reaction to things, and is able to sort of seek the lesson to be able to be the teacher in a moment like that, which I found very helpful. Because it seems like all we're doing now is just like reacting, like what's next. And what is her mantra? I can do hard things. Is that correct? I don't know if I'm misquoting that. It's like,
it's one of them, I think. Yeah.
We can sit in it and we can get through it. And I think that applies to so many different horrific things that are going on right now.
I'm just going to switch my air conditioning off, but 2 seconds. And John,
Okay.
I would like to hear your thoughts on the book.
Oh yeah, I think one of the things that jumped out to me the most right away, especially because we kind of started reading this book at a kind of, I feel like a time that I feel like this book kind of found me at the right time, because I just read another book that was talking a lot about kind of examining the ways that society programs you from birth. And so that was kind of a through line that she brought up a lot throughout this book that I kind of really, really connected with. And I kind of, something that's been on my mind a lot. And oh God, the section, I forget what chapter it was, about halfway through, where she's talking about, standing in the Barnes and Noble or the bookstore or whatever it was with her daughter, with Tish. And Tish is looking at the magazine covers and she like stops and like starts asking her questions about that. Like that section just completely was, like Erica, like eyes just like wide open. And then to follow it up with the next section where she goes into how like women are put in boxes and boys are too. And like, here's the way that she starts examining her relationship with her son and the worries about that. And it just, that one hit hard because I feel like I personally was also, I feel for Chase because I also was a very sensitive child. And like, that was one of
you were
obviously, I mean, come on. But yeah, like that for a long time when I was really young, like that was like, if my brother ever wanted to like pick on me or my friends ever wanted to pick on me, they would always say, oh, you're so sensitive. Like you're so, and it's only been fairly recently that I've kind of taken a step back and go, oh, like that, I have like a very visceral reaction to that word, whether it's good or bad, depending on the situation. But like reading that section of the book kind of made me really kind of return to that and have some thoughts with myself about it. So yeah.
It definitely has a lot of hit you in the face moments, this book. I think that's fair to say.
She's a great storyteller.
Oh, so yeah.
And I was just going to say the one thing you mentioned about, Tish and some of the stories that she relates, in terms of parenting her kids. And it struck me that some of the best storytelling and the ways to tell a story and engage with people is not obviously to preach at them, but some of the best novels in history have been told through the eyes of children. And that gives you such a different perspective on something you think you know. But yes. And Kaylyn, what about you?
Huge fan of Glennon Doyle. This is the first piece of hers I've read. So when she was referencing her other books, I was really glad that this is where I met her, because it seems like she's unafraid to expose a journey and the millions of ways we can deny our emotions and how that can set us on just a million different traps. And I thought that was so brave and encouraging. And it was like she was exposing the mess of being a human without being self-deprecating, which I find like a lot of brilliant women will speak. And then, I don't know, for intentionally or not, they'll kind of be like, but I'm crazy or I'm like,
right.
And then you're like, no, don't, like, stand where you are and own it.
Famous female apology.
Yes. And I just love that it was unapologetic and gentle and so vulnerable and just, it was beautiful. I mean, I just was such a huge fan, and just the message that, emotions are informants and we are so easily distracted and able to deny them. And she just, through her life story, is sharing how many like little lies became huge things. And like, just once, and once she meets Abby, and then it's like it's to come out, and it's that whole chapter.
I know.
Standing up and opening her arms.
That moment where I totally cried. I cried many times reading this book.
Yes.
But I think one of when she describes the moment when they both met each other, I was like, that is love.
Yeah.
You know. Oh, chills.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I was
things.
I was just recapping it last night, and I had sort of certain bookmarks, and I got to that chapter, and rather than kind of flipping through it, to make some notes, I read that whole thing again, and I was like,
tell me more about love.
Oh my gosh.
It's so
but
beautiful.
It's just so thank you. It's so beautifully written and described, and just the way that she talked, like the description of when I hugged her and I felt like home, or and that in itself is, to some extent can be a cliche, but the way that it was described is like, I smelled, like the fabric softener, I smelled all of this, and it was just like, oh, and it was just so real, and it brought you into that moment, and you were like, yes, that's all of the things that you realized in that moment. Mm-hmm. It was just beautiful. Yeah. But so the book touches on so many different themes, and then as I was kind of writing out, I was like, how did she get through so much? Like she tackled divorce and infidelity, sobriety, shame, bulimia.
She's a free woman.
Yeah.
Yeah.
About anything.
That's exactly what I was like. How did she get through so much? I mean, how many times in that book did you think, oh my God, I can absolutely relate to that because of this part of my life or whatever? It's like, we can do hard things because we have no choice. We have no choice.
Yes.
So a couple of questions that I had. So I wanted to start off with this because she talks about meeting Abby and falling in love with Abby towards the start of the book. Now, one question I have, and I want you guys to think about this: did falling in love with Abby cause Glennon Doyle to look at everything in her life and question it and redefine it? Was that the sort of defining moment, do you think?
I mean, I think that was maybe her tipping point. It's like there's that little sort of push where there's a glimmer of a safety net maybe. And like the safety net is far beyond all of these other obstacles you have to overcome to get to it. But just knowing that it's there somehow gives you something to strive for, I think. So, because I think maybe all of us can way of being maybe in a relationship and then meeting someone that kind of makes you finally have the courage to question that relationship or get out of it or whatever it is you need to do to be more true to yourself. And I think she was very, oh, thank you, sir. Sorry, my manservant just came in. So nice.
With a cocktail and a palm frond.
He did. Speaking of love, just entering your life. Yeah, I think sometimes that little glimmer of hope is what you need, and then that sort of is the catalyst for change when you start to look at other parts of your life as well, as you get stronger and being more true to yourself. I think that's sort of what happened. It was the tipping point, maybe.
I agree.
Yeah, it's like only Glennon could say what that was, but as a reader, it, just coming off of the, like diving off the pier of, oh my gosh, when you learn how to please, you abandon yourself. You can abandon yourself. And for her to have that moment of not even knowing what her body was doing, which certainly wasn't propelled by this intention to please. It was like her truth was like pulling, like, this is your truth, it was like screaming at her. And I think there's a point where she says, once I knew this love, I could not go back. It's like there's certain things I think we all learn and come to in multiple ways, work, love, really, anything, where once we see something, we can't unsee it. And whether that was the beginning of something or it was her feeling something familiar again, that was herself, not her leaving herself to please or fulfill others' desires, it was just the most beautiful eruption, like it was like, I can't even control my truth that's coming out of me, and I'm not going to filter.
Yeah,
that's
a scary moment isn't it?
Yeah. Oh, and what a crazy thing to be like, I don't know what's happening to me because I have not been functioning from my truth.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You know? Like that's what that kind of sounded like.
And her coming back to that kind of theme of like, you can build that truer, more beautiful version of your life that you see in your mind's eye only by how willing you are to burn everything down around you. And that really kind of struck a chord with me for sure.
Yeah. That was definitely one of those slap in the face moments for me was when she, and I think the way that she does it, rather than asking you, she never addresses you as the reader, but she talks to her friends, and her friend is sort of asking her what she should do, and she said, like, what is the truest, most beautiful version of your life you can imagine? And she asks that question in quotation marks, and that made me just go, oh, Glennon's asking me what the most beautiful, truest version of my life is. Oh, what is that?
Yeah.
And it says that, the truest, most beautiful life never promises to be an easy one. We need to let go of the lie that it is supposed to be.
Yeah, I love that example of the mother with her kid, the second child that was dying of the same disease. And when she came back for her ideal example of her life, she said, this is it. Because sometimes things that are beautiful and meaningful are not always easy. And that was an example that kind of blew me out of the water, because I'm like, oh, surely this mother is going to write something where she's going to say, where my children are well, my first child is still alive, and my child is no longer dying. But I mean, that blew me. I was just like, whoa, okay. Not everything that is worth having is perfect or easy or beautiful. And I don't know. I just thought that was really meaningful.
And it kind of goes with the other, I forget which chapter it was in, but she was talking about, I think it was such like an offhanded kind of like remark, but it was one of those like 6 words where I was just like stopped in my tracks, where she said something along the lines of like, none of the world's most empathetic people have ever had easy lives, or something like that. I forget what the exact wording was, but it was her talking about that exact thing where it's like, hardship is what, if we let it, it's what makes us more sensitive to the world around us and more able to kind of clearly see what is important and what is beautiful.
Yeah, like the destruction is essential to construction. If we want to build the new, we must be willing to let the old burn. I mean, that whole section I was just like really taken by, because how many, in our world, I think in a lot of ways we feel as if we've hit rock bottom, and hearing how much she talks about those moments in her own life as exciting times, because that means that something new is going to come from that, and it will be better than what was before. And just because we have to shatter through it doesn't mean that we should be afraid of that. We should look at those moments as opportunities. I think that's a really positive way to live your life, and I think it's a very truthful way if you take those examples, if you take those opportunities to make it better,
Yeah. It makes it an invitation. Like when something difficult comes up, instead of resorting to a denial of an emotion or challenge or anything, you're like, okay, there's something I need to learn. Let's go in, let's do it. It's kind of like this, it gives you this sense that her metaphor on being the burning bush, she's like, I'm not burning, but there's fire in me. Like, I'm not going to burn down, but it's in me. Like, it's not going to kill me. I thought it was just so, like, all of us need to hear that in some way or another at some point,
And sometimes it's the way that message is delivered. And like, for instance, Marilyn Monroe said, sometimes good things fall apart so better things can fall together. Now, I love that quote. And I say that to my friends every time they get dumped. But this book just sort of really digs into that idea, and that, like burning things down, and like, and you talk, when you talk about bushfires and when they're controlled, when they can be controlled, then it actually re-energizes the earth, and all of the nutrients go back into the earth and things can grow again. When it's controlled, obviously, I'm not talking about the bushfires in Australia towards the tail end of last year, but I went into that and I didn't know how to get out of it.
That's cool. You kind of got out.
Thank you. Thank you very
Great
much.
touch.
So let's talk about what this. Thank you. What did he make you? What do you have there?
It's just a white wine with some ice cubes.
Oh my God, Texas.
Well, what can you say?
I'm not going to make fun.
There are some habits that I, learned from being from Texas that I won't get rid of, but that's not a very long list in comparison to the ones that I will get rid of.
I remember there was a Jeff Foxworthy joke, and it was something like, if you've got lawn furniture in your in your living room, you might be a redneck.
Yeah. Oh my God. I had friends who had that stuff in their living room.
Oh man.
Moving on.
Uh-huh.
So let's talk about what this means in terms of our views of women and the way that we've grown up, and also let's sort of translate this to what it means to us as female artists. Like, how do we show up as female artists with these expectations that we have come to the stage with, and how are we've now seen things and now we can't unsee them, and how are we going to move forward with that? And John, let's start with our token male feminist. What do you think about this?
I mean,
No pressure.
Yeah, I know. I was gonna have a moment to collect my thoughts on this.
Maybe I'll ask you an intro question. Did it change your views as to how female artists show up?
I don't think it changed them. I think it reinforced them. Because Erica, you and I have had many a conversation about this, and especially in the context of the band that I run. Like, one of the things I've talked to Erica about is making it a priority to kind of restructure the band so that it's more gender equitable and more racially diverse. Especially Erica has a bunch of stories that she can tell you about her time with what's that little band you play with again?
The little one, is it the Birds?
The Beagles?
Or
Hawks,
something
the
like
Hawks.
that.
The Birds? Some Eagles? I don't know, whatever.
Something
But yeah,
like that.
I think so that
Sparrows?
Yeah, the Sparrows. There's just I can't even imagine the kinds of pressures that come with showing up, especially in such like a cis white male dominated industry. Sorry, guilty as charged. And I just reminded myself of that part of the book where she says there's two connotations to the way people say I cannot even imagine. There's the empathetic one where they're already imagining, and then there's the one that's like a dismissal. But sorry, I digress. No, I think it kind of reinforced the way that I've been feeling, and I think especially within the context of like the social uprisings that we're seeing around the world, especially in America right now. It's kind of forced me to have more conversations within myself to say, okay, you need to this is the time to sit and listen, because I've struggled with how to talk about it on like social media from my perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Because I feel like I don't want to be taking up airwaves that people who have much more lived experiences can.
I mean, there's definitely something to be said for being an ally who speaks up, though.
Yeah, of
course. I totally hear you, because we're in this sort of moment where I'm a white person. How do I show up and be an ally in a positive way that is not taking up space, but is still using my voice in a positive way? Yeah,
so I think it's kind of, for me, I'm reassessing and making sure that I'm doing as much as I can to kind of show up in that context in the way that female identifying performers show up in the space. Mm-hmm. Whether it's just being more aware of, the bar club gig life, making sure that you're like watching out for the people around you, and just a number of other ways. Mm-hmm.
When we get back to that eventually.
Oh God. I think I had a moment where I just like blacked out and forgot that that's a thing. So in 2022, when we start digging. Anyways, that's my 2 cents, I think.
I hear you. How about Kaylyn?
Well, her story about seeing the really confident 12-year-old on Tish's soccer team, where she was talking about how seeing this young woman be kind and confident and talented, but also friendly and just a possibly well-rounded young woman annoyed her, or it like stirred her in a way. And she was like, what? She's 12. What is this thing? And then she goes on to the point that there's this weird trend of it being more acceptable to be around a suffering woman or an insecure woman than a confident woman. And that shook me up a lot because I thought about even my background in acting. Like I thought about this one story in my senior year where we had a teacher, we each had to walk to the front of the class and the teacher was going to tell us our type.
Oh my God, I know exactly who this is, and this is
yes.
you and I can have a separate conversation about whoever that is.
Yeah. He probably said this to multiple, I mean, I'm sure he said this to many people, but I stood in front of the classroom and he said, "You're a leading lady. People will want to see you fall apart." And
oh my God, I don't even have, I can't.
No, and I remember thinking, what? And he said, people will want to see you fall apart to find you relatable. And I was like, so the only thing that will be relatable is if I'm falling apart. And I remember leaving that class and thinking to myself, well, that's bizarre. And then, you know what? I went into the New York acting scene and every part I played, I died. I was abused. I had to have a mental break. I fell apart. And then I looked at my music as this escape where I could be my lighter side or, more all like well-rounded. And then I started this band where I was kind of giving myself an alter ego. And this alter ego was like way more confident than I actually was. And she like was saying really sassy things and it wasn't going to land if I wasn't going to show up for it, but I remember feeling like, oh my God, people are going to think I've changed and no one's going to relate to me if I'm confident. Like, what is that? And I remember that check with myself, and this book made kind of like wove everything together for me to see, oh my gosh, like I've totally belittled my ability. Like I feel I connect with people all the time. And, I aim to relate. I'm an empathetic person as far as I think I am, but then this narrative that I have to be like, I have to be apologizing or I'm, people will only hang out if I'm sad. Like, I don't think I was really thinking these things, but when I looked at my art and a woman in the industry, I realized, I don't know, it felt a little more comfortable if I was just super vulnerable, which I prefer to be candid, like tell the real story before a song, sing the song with the truth that you wrote it with. But when I had to do this more fun, like don't flatter yourself type thing, I was very nervous. So I'm just so glad this book has made me kind of give myself permission to say, no, you can keep going in that direction. Like you don't have to be crying all the time.
I've got a couple of questions about that. So when that teacher, he was a teacher, acting coach, when he told you that,
Kaylyn and I went to the same college, which is why I know exactly. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Did you, in hindsight, do you think he was being a bit of a dick, or was there some truth to what he was saying and that audiences want to see that and that's fucked up?
I think it was the latter. I mean, the teacher, every time he would say something like that, he said way worse things like to other people, it seemed like he was also like, and I'm sorry, like at least like it was like, people will want to see you fall apart. That's the business. I mean, right when I got out of school, another acting teacher, I was like, oh my God, I went to a commercial audition and they said I had to lose 10 pounds. And I was like, what? And then she was like, yeah.
But that's the business. And it's like, oh, we're
business, like pre-Me Too movement too, like other things happening, it was just, that's the business.
Yeah.
And that's why you and I probably are not in the business anymore.
Well, and the irony of it is they put, I mean, this
talk about boxes. That chapter about your glass or your water, and sexuality is in. I didn't like the glass, but you can apply that metaphor to so many things in our lives. Like that is such an incredible metaphor for we're all water, and because she does that with her daughter with the buckets in the ocean. I'm such a sucker for a metaphor, so I was like all over her.
She's all about metaphors.
Songwriters.
I know.
And I love that. That's so true. Like society has put these glasses in these boxes and nobody fits in them. And I don't know why we keep trying to fit in them, because if people think they fit in them, they're probably not living their truth. And I have so many feelings about that experience that you had, because I had that experience. And how many other women did he affect? And not even just women. How many other vulnerable, eager students of acting, of the arts, did he just ruin for years? And he's not the only one. Everybody's buying into the system of let me tell you what you are, instead of why don't you tell me what you are? And I think that the word vulnerable in the acting world especially, but just as an artist, has been a dirty word. And I think that is absolutely insane. It's being vulnerable is human. Cry, like that whole chapter about, her little boy, those stories about the little boy having to go into the bathroom to cry because crying was seen as a sign of weakness, or kind of detested. My dad cried all the time growing up. My fiance cries all the time. I love that. I think that is that we should show that to little boys more often, and more than just little boys, people in general. I mean, anyway, I think that her approach to the idea of, she doesn't even ever really put herself in, she doesn't apply terms to herself, because she doesn't ever really associate or find it that any of them fit. And I fucking love that she said, sorry. I love that she kind of comes to those terms, because I think that's, we've all tried to describe ourselves. And I think that those are important things to do, especially when you're talking about, the LGBTQ movement, and especially now with racism. We need to be comfortable talking with terms like that, but we also need to understand that they're not the whole picture at all, by any means. And they've been abused by society for so long, by religion, by a white male-driven society. And I think that they've been used to keep us in these glasses, in these boxes. And I'm not here for that anymore.
No. And honestly, for lack of a better word, fuck comfortable. That's exactly what needs to be dismantled right now, is for there to, I mean, I don't know if we're going in this direction, but go to the uncomfortable places, talk about the uncomfortable things, because clearly comfort is the thing that has been making so much things, so many things that need to change, just sit,
Yeah, it's why nobody wants to talk about it.
Right.
Her chapter about the, being attacked is not making space for women of color to come into the conversation, and taking that space from them, and being shocked, but taking that in, as opposed to rejecting it. She did such an amazing job of taking in the information, sitting in the uncomfortable feeling of, did I do this wrong? And using it to fuel her down the line and being more of an activist. It's just, we're all so conditioned to be oh, is that uncomfortable? Can't be there. And it's not time for that anymore. It's time to get into those comfortable spaces and sit in them.
Yes.
I mean, I'll come back to that, but I think as an example, to relate to you, Kaylyn, when I first got into radio a few years ago, I had a boss of mine who said to me as I was starting, he said, look, Steph, people are going to like you less because you're female. And I was like, what do you mean? And he was like, well, if you think about it, think of, and he named a few presenters in the UK. And he said, for the women, they're all very much Marmite. Do you know that term? Basically, it's like a Vegemite type thing. It's a very distinct taste. And the point is, they market it as you either love it or hate it. And he said that sort of about women. And he said, listen, this isn't, and like that teacher said to you, he said, this isn't how it should be, but he said, that's how it is.
But he didn't do anything to change it.
No, he put me on air. He did put me on air.
Well, that's something.
Yeah. But
he made you feel so insecure before he put you on air. He wasn't preparing you for success. He was preparing you. He was conditioning your brain to expect less.
I feel like it may have, I mean, this was a while ago. I've kind of forgotten what the context was, but I feel like it was in response to, I got this really shitty email, and I was on air at the time, and somebody wrote in, I mean, it was a double, like it was probably a double-sided page of A4 paper about how much he hated listening to me.
Cool.
He absolutely hated it. And I was on air and this came in and I was reading it and I was like, oh. And it really hit me whilst I was, presenting. And I talked to my boss about it afterwards and I said, because it came to me, I could have just deleted it, but I gave it to my boss and I said, what do you think of this? And he said, I don't care. And I said, well, what do you mean? And he said, well, and he explained this. And he said, quite honestly, I would prefer it if you got a reaction. He said, this guy is listening. He didn't switch the radio off. And he said, I would much rather you stand out than blend into the background.
That's that's something like Glennon Doyle in the book is talking about, like when that lady comes up to her and has all these negative things to say. And she's like, well, that's, you unfollowed me. That's the best choice for you. And I'm happy for you.
Mm-hmm. But it prompted me to think about women and how they show up and the reaction that they get. And I like the very obvious, the most obvious thing I could look at was female comedians. And I remember, like the ones that were sort of perceived to be the funniest were the sort of beta male, where they were maybe a bit chubby, slightly less attractive. They weren't threatening. They weren't threatening to women. They weren't threatening to other men. They just weren't threatening to anybody. And when a woman came on, and I remember, and she was black, she was beautiful. She sort of wore this like body hugging dress, and she like sort of electric blue, and had electric blue heels on to match, and her hair was like up and beautiful, and she was stunning. And the reaction that she got, it took her much longer to get a warm response from the crowd. And it wasn't because she was less funny, but it was just this sort of collective like intaking of breath because they found her threatening, whether it was because she was black and a woman and beautiful.
Oh, yeah. You can't be beautiful and funny. You can't be beautiful and smart. You can't be beautiful and successful. You can only
be beautiful and talented
or something else.
Right. But when
you know what that is, all that is though, is in my opinion, it's like we've been pitted against each other from the start as women, always. Mm-hmm. Like I don't know. There's always been this sort of like threatening thing. I've worked so hard to surround myself with women that I think are outspoken, super talented, like trying to find their truth as desperately as I am, which I don't know that I've found it yet, but we'll get there. And just like strong women, because I think so often in the industry, as I'm speaking as like a music artist, for example, like I think so often in the industry, we're supposed to be like competitive, like because there's usually only one or two of us in the band. So it's like, well, there's less spots. So automatically I have to like have my guard up. And if you're a beautiful, talented, charming woman, then of course we can't be friends. We have to be enemies because that's what
can only be one of us.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Or, the other side of that is like, there's so many times where as like one of the only females in a band, like we'll walk into a venue and I'll be the only one asked for my badge because I'm a girl. So I must be a groupie. Right. Or you just having moments where I would try to offer a suggestion and like everybody kind of turns and looks like, oh, that's cute. Isn't that adorable?
Yep.
It's super frustrating, but
that's a real theme of the book. It's this sort of mindset that women should be grateful and, not rock the boat and not want more. And it's this idea that like that idea is given to girls, but not boys. Like for boys, it's like, go out and get what you want. But for women, it's like, oh, but you've got this, you should be grateful. And in the same, way that she was thinking about her divorce and she was like, what should I do? But I should be grateful because I have these two kids and like a dad who's great with his kids. Should I just stay with him because I should be grateful for what I have currently.
I mean, that description of her marriage where she's like, I learned to have a husband. I learned to fake orgasms. I learned to this and this and this. And I'm just like, I know so many women who have been there. Oh, and so many. Why are we protecting? Why, like, this is a question for you, John, because I'm like, why are we protecting men from not even knowing that they're bad in bed? Why are we doing that?
I've tried to let right on there.
John, I don't think that's a reflection on you. I'm just
I'm just saying, would you like, is there a world in which, like, what would change, do you think, if we all just stopped faking it?
The world would melt down is what would happen, because I think
men's egos would break.
Well, I mean, I was a high school boy at one point, and like so many of the conversations around that kind of stuff, it takes such a language of like the language that a conquistador would use. Like it is like such a language of like power and
you mean as from the
like
male
from
perspective?
The boys, from the males, like
Gotcha.
That is the way that men are conditioned to view sex. It's not like an intimate thing. It's not something that is like meant to bring you closer with somebody. It is, or even just not even meant to be something fun. It is meant to be like, I'm being a man. I'm taking over. Like, this is me. Yeah. Like that. It's fucking horrifying. And even like as a little preteen boy in rural Virginia in the South, like there is such an aspect of so many boys knowing like, hey, there's something kind of fucked up about this. But like, if I speak up, I will get socially ostracized. And so what I think would happen if you just stopped pretending that men are good in bed is most men would just like totally freak out and melt down. Because they, whether they would admit it or not, or even be conscious of it or not, what they would hear is not, hey, like, we can work on this and make you a little bit better. They would hear, you're weak, you are nothing. Because that's just the way we're conditioned.
Yeah, you're not set up to succeed. I think she realized that with her own little boy in the book. She's like, oh my God, I didn't take the same time to prep him for becoming an adult that I did with my daughters.
And the whole thing with his phone, when she gave him a phone and like she was like just talking about him watching his bright eyes just like slowly dull. Like oof. Yeah, I know.
In terms of the way that you say, it would crush men, but it's really because we teach men what their value is.
Yeah.
Through toxic masculinity.
Yes.
And through power and dominance and all of those things.
Don't get me wrong. It would be a great thing to crush most men, honestly. But it's like the vocabulary that we use to teach men what being a man is just like so terrifying. Like,
I mean, I hear it all the time at Trump rallies. That's what I see.
Yeah.
That language.
Yeah. And like that, I remember one of the first things, and I am in a very, very privileged position in that my dad was also one of the men who cried a lot and was like very kind of open with and was very like able to communicate his emotions and how he was feeling without being violent or without being whatever it was. And I remember very distinctly once, I had gotten in a fight at school or something. I don't know what it was, but he came and picked me up and like was driving me home. And like, I was being such a, little shit about it and being like, blah, 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 blah. And one of the things he said to me was essentially, a real man does not lead with his fists. He leads with his heart. And that was like one of those moments I was like,
I love your dad.
Like frozen in time where it was like a light bulb goes off and I was like, oh, what? And like that was the last we kind of spoke of it. And like one thing that he always did is if something big happened, good or bad, instead of like sitting us down right away, is he would write us a long letter and just like leave it on our pillow. Because he was like really kind of a proponent of like, oftentimes in high emotional situations, like you should back off and like take a moment to gather your thoughts. And that kind of, when she started talking about the knowing and that kind of like sinking in and dropping, like that was what I was reminded of, because I feel like whether he knew it or not, like he really, really hammered that home with me and my siblings of like, when you get into that kind of high emotional situation, like take a moment and just kind of like step, even if you just step away a half a step, just to kind of get some breath. I forget how I got here. I just lost my train of thought.
The knowing and
Good.
Yeah, I think it just,
masculinity.
yeah, like, so I guess it comes from a place of love. When coming back to your original point, Erica, is it comes from a place of love of me saying we should crush most men in as loving a way as possible, because it's just.
Sorry to interrupt. You mean like,
No,
as in
you're
burn
good.
the house down so they can grow?
Yeah, and
There you go.
coming back to the comfortable versus uncomfortable, like growth is never comfortable. It always hurts. And like, we love to tout Martin Luther King Jr.'s quotes on MLK Day, but we forget that his approval rating in the public was like, what, 20%, 15% at the time? Like, people hated him. So I kind of, because people hate being uncomfortable.
Yeah,
So
that chapter
yes,
about where she talks with her kids about whether or not they would have been marching with him. And she wants to say yes so badly. And then she's like, again, having another uncomfortable moment of truth with herself, saying, I don't think we would have, but that's the kind of the lesson, isn't it?
Yeah. That's a good point.
It's a bloody great book.
It's a really good book about, it's not, I came at this thinking that it would be like more driven towards feminism, but it ended up really just being a lesson in how to deal with difficulties in your life at large.
Yeah.
How to be a better human. I think, she kind of comes back to that idea of like, we have to rediscover what it is to be human and how we can be more human. And I think it's a really great book to read right now because it touches on a lot of the things that we're really kind of unearthing.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. But also how when you are letting yourself be more human, it invites others to be more human.
Mm-hmm.
Like how many times did someone do something silly and it just showed their humanness a little more, and then you felt a little free, like even in micro ways, just like, I don't know, I'm in my PJs, like, like, this is what I wanted to do today, so that's what I did. Like, hopefully someone else can go on a book club podcast and say I felt like I'm gonna do it. Like, it's like, whatever. The more we let ourselves be free, that freedom is contagious. Truth is contagious. So beautiful, and she says it in a million ways.
I think definitely where I have really connected with people on a meaningful level is where we have shared something vulnerable about one another, and it might, like, someone's got to do it first.
Yeah. Absolutely.
But as soon as you open that door, there's this sort of connection of, there's a respect, because it's like, that person was brave with me. And that will, regardless of whether you agree, will lead to respectful conversations that can be positive, I think. And like, I have a good friend who, he's a Republican, staunch Republican, gun owner, many, Trump supporter, all of that. But he is one of my fiercest LGBT allies. And
ain't the world a funny thing?
Isn't it? Isn't it really? And
don't fit in glasses. We don't fit in glasses.
Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah.
But the Supreme Court ruling last week, he phoned me to say, isn't that great? And I was like, that was really lovely. Like, he was actually probably the only person that phoned me. I mean, I was sort of on Facebook going, yeah, isn't this great? But he was the only person who phoned me to say this was wonderful. And he, was like, I, read the dissents and everything else, and like disagreed on maybe this point about like the actual law of it. Not like he was in agreement that it should be illegal to discriminate on the grounds of sexuality. But he was just like, on the sort of small point, he was like, I agree with that, but it should have happened, but it should have been done as a bill through Congress.
Yeah.
But I was like, isn't that wonderful that we can disagree so fundamentally in some ways, but be able to kind of have this respectful relationship and conversation about things. So, but that all happened because one of us was willing to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
And I think it was me first. I don't know. I'm kidding. As we wind up, as we're coming to the top of the hour, would you like to share your favorite quote / slap in the face moment of this book?
I had a list right here. Let me pick one. Someone else go first.
Yeah, like
Yes.
like a new Bible. Thank you, Glennon.
Yeah, seriously, I'm gonna reread this so many times because it's
You
also
know what?
she covers so many things without being long. Like, it's not a long book. It's amazing how much she just like packs in.
And like the chapters are very quick. There's just sort of a couple of pages and you move on to something, and it's really digestible.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I'm not going first because I need a moment.
Let's see.
Okay. You lot are useless. All right.
No, I got one. Here we go.
Okay, I got one.
Okay.
What the world needs is masses of women who are entirely out of control.
Yes, that's a good one.
That was amazing. I mean, the fact that she doesn't say this, but my interpretation was she leads her life aware that everyone is here for the first time, as far as we know. And you are going to learn from your children. You are going to learn from someone with a different background. Like, you cannot maintain the universe in your brain. You have the universe to continue learning and continue making mistakes to grow from them, continue burning things to rebuild, to continue like moving in a way that is not about getting things right, but getting things true. You know, and the whole like idea that the biggest compliment for women, it seems, would be to say, you're so selfless, and how that needs to be ripped apart, and that women can be instead of being martyrs for their children or their family or their friends or their relationships, they can be models of independence, of humanness, of making mistakes and still having a good heart, like trying. We're all just trying.
Yeah.
That's my swan song this evening.
I mean, okay, here's one. This is brave means living from the inside out. Brave means in every uncertain moment, turning inward, feeling for the knowing and speaking it out loud. Which, damn, we all need to do a lot of turning inward right now. And I mean, I think that just speaks to like, brave doesn't mean the same thing for everyone, which she talks about in the book. And I think like the importance of the inward moment, I think a lot of us are sitting in that right now. I definitely am. Like, I'm sort of feeling a little lost as to like how I can be best of service, and like doing a lot of sort of just reflection about it and, you know, educating myself. And I think what was great about this book is she's like, that's good. And everybody's timeline is different. So like, if you're not the person who's going to like run out their front door, right, ready to know exactly what they have to say and like how to say it right now, like in all aspects of life, that's okay, you know? And I feel like I needed to hear that and hear her story about how she was able to refocus herself and like come out on the other end screaming, because, you know, it's a tough thing you're always trying to say like, well, I must not be brave because I didn't behave in that way, or like I must not be strong because I didn't behave in that way. And I think like this book is so much about putting down the iPhone, putting down the outward things that come into your life, and like really going into the closet, like she said, and like sitting there so that you can come out a whole being as yourself and not pieces of other people's being. And
wow, that was really nice.
Stuck with me.
Yeah.
Wow, John compliment.
That was really nice. Not being pieces of other people's being. That's good. I like that. Okay, well, I thought of mine, but I found the section in the book, but it's a little too long to actually read. It's the section where, how do you say her youngest daughter's name? Amma or Amma?
Amma, I think.
Oh, I thought it was Amma.
Amma?
There was, remember that?
I know.
I'm going to say Amma.
I thought it was Emma because in that HBO show it was Emma, and I thought that was it.
Okay, cool. That's what I'm gonna say, Emma. It's where she's getting really frustrated with her classmate Tommy because he'll never turn in his homework, and she has that whole conversation with her about being like, well, why do you imagine that he's like, why are you able to get your homework done? And like watching, like reading and kind of through the reading, watching her kind of explain the concept of empathy to her youngest daughter through just questioning her about it and making her kind of find her way to it. And then she basically says like, Emma still gets annoyed at Tommy, but she has her imagination to keep her soft and open. And I think that is just like one of the most succinct like descriptions of empathy I think I could ever imagine. And I that one really kind of hit me hard, because I think if more people took that moment to kind of sink into their knowing and imagine, like really imagine things from other people's perspectives, a lot of what we see going on right now would get sorted out pretty quick.
Totally agree.
Yep. No, I agree. Thank you for sharing. I mean, I will just share my last one with you, but I will just go back and reiterate, what is the truest, most beautiful version of your life you can imagine? Because that is literally something that I take away from that book and I ask myself every day. And it was my slap in the face moment. And I'm really grateful for that. Just that one. If there's nothing else I take away, and there are many things I take away, but if there's nothing else, it's certainly that. So, well, this was fun. Thank you for having happy hour with me and book club.
Good.
Well,
thank you for having us read the book, because damn, it really
seriously, thank you.
Kicked me in the pants.
Kicked me in the toe.
Oh, wait, is that a Texas thing coming out? Sorry.
Kicks you in the camel toe. Are there any? You said I don't know. This is a feminist thing. I don't know. One gin and tonic. It's all it takes. In terms of the book club, and I'll ask you because you're here. As artists, was this an interesting book to read as artists? And like looking as I think to the next book club, and I have an idea in mind. Do you like something that sort of focuses on who you are as obviously a person, but also how you can relate to it as an artist as well?
I think this book was my favorite we all know I didn't really enjoy the last book, but whatever. I think our role right now is shifting and becoming less about like just us as artists, and we're being called on to speak to the world. This book was really helpful to me because it's like, I need to really dig into like the hurt and the brokenness of the entire world so that I can have something actually important to say and helpful maybe, because I don't know. I just found it to be like more inspiring to me right now than any other book just about art, because art feels so insignificant to me. And I feel really not inclined to create my own art because it feels like I don't want to clog up the world with something that I just want to whine about. I want to actually like write something that will make it affect people in a deeper way, because I think that's what we're being called on to do right now. And I think that's what I liked about this read, is because it kind of, we have to continue to be educated about our world if we're going to continue to be good artists. So that's what I'll say. I like this one.
Well, thinking about, if you have suggestions, send them in. I think there were some on my list, and one is a book by Lamont Dozier. I think it's either Lamont or Lamont. And in Scotland, Lamont is a surname, but here is his first name. So I'm not sure if it's Lamont or Lamont. Lamont Dozier, because I've never met him. I can't ask him. But it's his autobiography. And if you're not familiar with Lamont Dozier, he is 1/3 of a songwriting partnership, Holland Dozier Holland, that was responsible for, 90% of all Motown hits that came out of.
Oh wow, cool.
Yeah, and so a black man, who and he starts off telling, and I've read half of it, but he starts off his story. I think he was in Detroit, And he talks about growing up in a really impoverished home, and his dad's an alcoholic, and they wake up in the middle of the night and there are rats in their room. Like he starts there, and he gets to worldwide fame and recognition and all of that stuff.
Wow.
And in terms of like hearing stories from people of color, that's definitely something I'm interested in right now.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And also, let's talk about, as this moves forward, I mean, this is probably an outside conversation, but I started to learn more about all of the songs that are by white artists that were totally stolen from.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's something that we need to talk about. Like, and
The
how
music
they just
yeah.
got away with it.
The music industry's got a lot of explaining to do about that, because it's like 90% of hits or more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like
Looking at you, Led Zeppelin.
Yeah, like
looking at
rock and
Rolling
roll.
Stones.
Yeah.
It's
It's just,
awful.
anyway,
Yeah.
that might be
talk
something
about
to break
That's an
that
interesting
break
idea.
down.
Let's discuss that offline, because there
Yeah.
are certain ways that we could do that technically. But I would need to kind of think about how to do it in this format. But I would love to. I think that would be really wonderful to do. Everyone, I was going to say guys, but we're people. We're not guys. This has been such a pleasure. I really loved. I mean, I do this because it's for me. But if it helps other people, that's great.
No, it's so fun.
It's
Thank
super
you so
fun.
much for your time, your efforts, and your energy, and bringing it to the space for this conversation. I appreciate you. So thank you.
Thank
Anytime.
Thank you very much.
All right.
This
We'll
is
see you
great.
soon.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.
The New York Artist Collective podcast. This next one's about.